All right, welcome to Unlocking Astrology with the founder of Unlock Astrology, Mr. Samuel Reynolds. Is unlockingastrology.com or unlock astrology?
Unlockastrology.com.
Unlockastrology.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Today is Virgo. Today is Virgo's day. And we were having an off mic conversation about people, both of us being some, amateur or maybe professional cultural anthropologists. I probably mistakenly said that the Virgo is the only human sign in the zodiac. Is it the only human?
No, no,
There's
it's not.
two?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Is it the
There at
first
least
human? Is the first human?
no Gemini.
Gemini? Okay, twins. You're right. All right. All right. Educate us, sir. Let me shut up because I obviously don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, Virgo is the sixth sign of the zodiac. It's kind of the midpoint. Well, not kind of. It is pretty much at that point, going toward the midpoint. And you know, a lot of people have this perception that about Virgo, that Virgo's about perfectionism, cleanliness, and having everything neat, and that Virgoan people are consistently always neat and perfectionistic, and that is not my experience. Um, it's not to say then that they're completely disorderly. It's just the opposite, but it's more so to think in a different range. And I think the key word that people can use, or key words for Virgo, are efficiency and preparation. Virgos like to be prepared. They want to be
Mm,
ready.
okay. I believe that Virgos and Taurians have similar proclivities, except I say Virgos are more righteous. Like we'll move in a way that looks similar, but they're more righteous. I think of Ashford and Simpson.
Mhm.
The combination works well. My first college roommate, my only college roommate, was a Virgo. I didn't know it. She was my best friend throughout my college years and beyond. My brother's a Virgo. Like, I'm surrounded by Virgos, and I seem to really work well with them because it's like they get me in a way. As a Taurus, we can be misunderstood by some folk, who are, oh, you're so whatever. There's this chemistry that seems to work. I don't know what that is, and eventually we'll get to,
Well, no, I can tell you
oh,
simply.
okay.
You're
Okay.
both Earth signs, so it's the
Oh,
second Earth sign after Taurus, right?
okay.
So there's a way in which you have, again, just to review briefly the elements. Elements we can think of like belonging to a family, right? There's ways in which you get, each other, like my fire sign wife talking about, I must express myself and I want to do this and have adventure. And I'm like, well, why? Right. Whereas another fire sign will really understand that and be attuned, like, oh, yeah, let's just go burn ourselves out and just, have fun. And just, it's like kind of like, watching a kid like chasing its own butt, going, like, okay, I know I've offended all the fire signs for that, but that's how it can look to the non fire sign people, right? There's a way in which you have the sense of, connection. So in earth signs, you feel the sense of grounding, the sense of like, okay, we said we're going to do such and such at such a time. We're going to do this. There's also an understanding in terms of the relationship to the material. Like what time is dinner, right? It's like dinner. We're going to have it. It's going to be ready. There's expectations. Whereas like you might talk to a water sign. It's like, well, I didn't feel like it. What do you mean you didn't feel like it? Who cares? You didn't feel like it. You talk to a fire sign. It's like, do we really need to eat? Couldn't we just take a pill or something like? What are you talking about, right? So there's a grounding that you can have with another um, earth sign like Virgo. Virgo, though, is different from Taurus because Taurus is a fixed water or earth sign. And then we have a more mutable, changeable sign, a sign of Mercury with Virgo.
Hmm.
And for them, you might think like, then that means they're wishy-washy. That's not exactly what it means. That's the readiness part. It's kind of like I'm analyzing, I'm looking at things with the idea, with the intention that I can improve it, that it wants to be better, that it can be better, that by going through a process, by going through some measure of method, that it will be better, right? So that's why I say readiness and efficiency. The efficiency part is that Virgos will think about what becomes the most efficient way by which to get a task, a process finished. So, when I first went to a Virgo's home and it was a mess rather than, as neat as I thought Virgos would be, I kind of was baffled, and I was like, well, maybe this is a weird Virgo, or maybe this is blah, blah, blah. Then I saw it a few more times. Now, there are definitely some Virgos I've gone, homes I've gone into. Desks are immaculate, everything is neat, organized, whatever. Until I started realizing that there is a pattern. So in those messy homes of those Virgos, what I realized is that it was most efficient for them to have a messy home because something else was occupying their attention, right? Meaning that I had to get my work done. I'm working on this project. I'm doing my music, right? There are a lot of Virgos involved in music and
Yeah.
intellectual endeavors.
Shout out
Right?
to my girl, Pebbles. Hey, Pebbles. Hey, P. Shout
Yeah,
out to Raphael Sadiq. Uh, uh, oh my goodness.
Ludacris,
Beyonce.
Ludacris.
Ludacris. Come on. Come on.
There's a lot of, I once had a debate on Twitter, on, which
Oh,
sign had the
wait, hold
most.
on. Michael Jackson. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Continue.
we definitely have to talk about Michael. We have to talk about Michael, and we have to talk. I'm definitely going to talk about Beyonce. But yeah, I once had a debate on Twitter on which sign had the most people in hip hop, whatever, and it turns out really it's between two signs, and they're both signs of Mercury, Gemini and Virgo, right? Which makes sense. Mercury is the communicator, talking, blah blah blah. But it's not just hip hop, right? It's all anything that relates to like a lot of performance and performers are Virgos. And I thought for a long time that the best performers, I should say actors, were going to be Leos, right? I was like, it must be the Leos, right? Again, early stages of learning astrology and just going with sun signs. So I was like, oh, it must be the Leos. It's not. It's actually the earth signs. It's Virgo, right? And it's also going to be, in terms of putatively, it's whoever has won the most Academy Awards has been the Capricorns, right? But let's go back to Virgo. So, you look at Sean Connery, you look at he's a Virgo. And then you look at Michael Jackson. So I just knew now sidereally, if you get into sidereal astrology, Michael Jackson is a Leo, right? But what makes sense for me as a Virgo, I mean, for him as a Virgo, is if you watch him and you watch his process and you watched him over the years. First off, anybody who's kind of done the boogaloo and kind of knows these movements, right? It's you start off small with these incremental movements, right? And then as you get more competence with them in terms of having them in flow, you make them look effortless. That's what Michael would do. He would be the master of micro movements and taking those micro movements, stringing them along, right, in terms of the efficiency, paying attention to detail, and then just make them effortless, which is what he did with his moonwalk. Doesn't mean I can do it, but you get the idea, right? Right? You can do it a little bit. So you see that level of attention to detail. It's something I also talked about with Beyonce. So I mentioned Whitney Houston when I talked about Leo and how she had the raw power of her voice. Now, Beyonce may not have that same magnitude of power, but she does have, through attention to detail, attention to mastery, to discipline, to structure, to process, she does have attention to, managing the power that she does have, you know, um, so much so that she's built an empire, right? I mean, like the magnitude of what Beyonce has done, as a performer, as an icon, really testifies to the sense of not just beauty, but also in terms of workmanship. And I think that's another key word to think about with Virgo: craftsmanship, workmanship. So it's interesting. I mentioned to you, I think privately, that if you think about the movie, you know, Dreamgirls with J Hud, Anika Noni Rose, and Beyonce, all three of those Dreamgirls are Virgos, right? And they're born within days of each other, right? And what's significant about that is that on some level, What's the symbol for Virgo? The virgin, holding a chaff of wheat, right? It's kind of this way in which they embody not perfectionism, but the readiness, the rightness, the ready to the ability to deal with the embodiment of things and wanting to embody those things as a vehicle toward bringing something into the world. And so that brings into like the problems that people have with Virgos, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the problems people and the people that the problems that people have with Virgos often is that they're so damn critical. Why are they so critical? Right? And it's understandable, right? um to some degree. What happens with Virgo is that they have the running assumption, whether you want to look at that as right or wrong, that you want to be your best self. So if you come out with high water pants and showing some measure of your socks, that too much of your leg or whatever, they're gonna just be like, and I guess I'm speaking about men, but I guess it could be for women too. They're just gonna be like, why are you wearing that, right? And it just comes out, boom, and you're like, well, what do you mean wearing what? Because they're going with the assumption like you want to represent yourself and look at your best, right? Or like if you come out with your shirt, something crazy like your shirt inside out, like, did you get dressed in the dark? Like, why are you doing that? So people like, they just pick and nitpick at every little thing.
I
And
love that you're saying that right now, Sam. And I think for the Virgos out there, it's like that's a light bulb moment. And I guess the question people should ask themselves is, do you want to be your best self?
that's the thing. That's the beauty of Virgo. And but the wisdom of Virgo also is learning when to, I guess maybe this is called, I don't know, entrainment or some measure of invitation. You know, it's it's going rather than just your assumption on what should be correct. It's kind of like, how do I build a relationship with this person so that we can come to some measure of agreement on what might be the best course of action, which might also be silence. It's like, well, let me fail, let me do this thing, let me whatever. I think that's generally true for, I guess, a good measure of the mutable signs: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, but particularly the first three I listed. With Virgos, you know, they may need to learn to ask, are you open to feedback? Right?
Mm,
That might be a whole big moment for them, rather than thinking like, oh, well, let me just offer it because obviously you don't want to look like that. You don't want your resume to look like that. Your resume looks like you just threw some words on it, right? Rather than like, okay, I'm glad you've done this. This is, that you've put together your resume. That's a great first step. Are you open to feedback? Are you looking for any feedback? And the person like, no, no, I'm just going to submit it as is. Now, the Virgo has to kind of go through the motions and learn like, okay, this is making me mad, uncomfortable. I'm looking at it, but I should say something, but they just told me no, which means no.
no means no.
No means no, which means then you don't feel like you have to be the Archangel Michael and say like, no, I want to be the savior here. You don't have to do that. So, and that's the other thing, because sometimes Virgo, whether we're talking about in other signs or for other planets, Venus and Virgo especially, where they think being the helpmate or being helpful means that you are the help. Like, I have to do this. Who else is going to do it? They become martyrs. And this goes back to something that I've talked about, where you can have the inversion of the other sign. What's usually associated with martyrdom is Pisces. But, you know, there's an inflection that can happen between all the signs. I mentioned this with Taurus and Scorpio. I mentioned with Gemini and Sagittarius and Cancer and Capricorn, Leo and Aquarius. The same is true for Virgo and Pisces. So there's a way in which Virgo, by wanting to participate in the process of readiness, helping others, um, situate things for people, they can get too caught up in terms of looking out for other people, not also thinking about their interests. Which brings me to some deep things to talk about. One thing I mentioned to
Wait,
you
wait.
before.
Before you get there, I just want to
Okay.
pause in this moment. The need to be right, or they're perceived to have a need to be right
That's
all the time,
correct.
be right. But is it also like the need to be right in that moment? How does someone navigate that? Because the need to be right is a good thing, right? To be correct in a moment. How is, if people are dealing with Virgos, how do you deal with the need? I call it righteousness. There's like, if it's wrong, the Virgos that I've dealt with, they're not doing it. And they're
Hmm.
unafraid
You mean
to.
ethically wrong, or just not, doesn't, it's not done well?
Well, I mean, I know I have a Virgo in my life who doesn't care about ethics. So no, it's there's a due north with them. There's a
Hmm.
right and wrong, and not necessarily ethically.
Yes, that's true. And what happens, what I would say to them, you know, it is good to be attentive to mm, standards, right? Until standards get in your way. What
Mm,
I say about, and this is true for, a lot of activists, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Right. And so when the Virgo gets to the point that they're willing to lose in order to be right, what's that doing for you? How's that working for you? Right. In my estimation, you know, I don't think that really works. Right. If you have to, if you go by the deadline, or go past the deadline for just because you wanted to get something so meticulously in order, like you were really trying to align this R right at the margin, right? And so you just wanted to look right because it just annoyed you that you couldn't really move on. And this is a Virgo problem. You couldn't move on. You're losing the battle, right? It's not worth it. And I think that's one of the things they have to learn. That also can be tied up with the need to be helpful, to kind of make things right. You know, sometimes it's like let it be good enough as part of the process.
mm,
And that's the key thing of understanding the dimension of the process. One of the things that's interesting, I was going to say about, dealing with the deeper aspects of Virgo as we, relate to what we talk about in terms of our people. So it's believed that the first indentured Africans came during the time of Virgo, toward the end of August. We don't have the exact date. We just have a conjecture for a date. I believe it's like the 28th or something like this of August, 1619. And I often think about that. This doesn't go to the supposition that, oh, we are Virgo people. I know people get into that. No, we are Pisces people. We're Cancer people. If that floats your boat, whatever, that's fine. But you can meditate on different dimensions of sign or signatures for all kinds of people. United States has, for instance, several different charts we can use. So there's several different charts that can be applicable to us, right? But if we think about ourselves in terms of Virgo, I've often thought about, in rereading and looking at Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro, how we can get so much caught up in Virgo, like having the right shoes, the right look, coordinated things that we get. This is things that Carter G. Woodson talked about, like how we have all the fastidiousness within our homes. But I'm like, you broke, right? You're not thinking about the long-term aspects of, how you build and work with what you have, right? Where you can be service oriented, but you're not in control of the service, right? I think a lot too in terms of the arguments that we've had in not just the diaspora, but in terms of especially Black American dialogue. You know, if we read the 19th century critically, I think Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois both had a point. We seem to, in the early 20th century, like, nah, Booker T was just wrong. Nah, it was, you need a talented 10th, blah, blah, blah. When I went with more of a critical eye and looked at Booker T, who was, I believe, was a Taurus. I mean, he actually may have been at the end of Aries. We don't have a birth date for him, a clear birth date, but more recently, it's believed that he was Aries. But sometimes I read his biography, I think Taurus. But one thing that he talks about, speaking of service, he was very clear, like we be that we should be in control of building the bricks and making all these things, that we be the bedrock. And he thought it in terms of like being accepted by white society. So that is definitively respectability politics. True. But there's a lot of power in that too, though. Like if you have the foundation for how something works, then nothing, and you couple that with like the idea of governmental power, you're a force to be reckoned with.
And Tuskegee's still here.
Right.
Just saying.
So I think when we, and it's interesting to me also in terms of dealing with Virgo, there are a lot of Black intellectuals who are Virgos. Sonia Sanchez, Richard Wright, Dream Hampton,
Wow.
Eddie Glaude. I think Jelani Cobb he's August 21st. So he's on a quote unquote cusp. It depends on what time he was born. I have to ask Frat at some particular point if he'll ever tell me. He's an atheist. So foxhole atheist, as he says. So he probably may never say. I'm blanking. I mentioned Richard Wright, but there's just so many. Imani Perry, right? There's just this list of people. And when I think about that, I think we're dealing with the analytical, readiness aspect of Virgo, like how can we be better prepared as a people? How can I be better prepared to deal with this world? And people talk about the analyzing part of Virgo, but they don't realize that the analyzing function of a Virgo is to see how things compartmentalize or come together toward like a particular process. So yeah, I think that's, a key element of understanding Virgo, both in the larger sphere, but in the microsphere, the day to day, it's kind of like, you call them in when you want to know, if something's correct. You talked about it as right, but I would also say it's correct. And also, the sign that I associate with, well, actually, if you need a well, actually moment, call a Virgo, right? Because then, they'll be like, well, actually, it's this. And I have like my cadre of Virgos where I need, like, even with astrology or particular things, like, oh, does Heraclitus talk about this or blah, blah, blah. Or this? Well, yeah, actually, I think that, they just get into that. They nerd out. There's a Virgo I love on Twitter and Instagram, lover or hater, Trudy. I don't know Trudy's last name, but she's just known as Trudy on, she can be well actually in terms of like looking at facts, data, information, so much so that, a lot of her work has been pilfered by white and Black academics, without attribution. So yeah, and one thing I didn't know, that I should talk about as I round things out is that I didn't know before I got on Twitter, a lot of people hate Virgos because I didn't have that experience. I don't have that relationship with them. But a lot of people hate Virgos. And I've often thought about that, since I don't have that. I've already confessed the sign I had a problem with. And then, the universe, and this is a caution in general for people. Be careful of the sign you hate because it's the part of yourself that you haven't really dealt with.
Come on.
Right? And so for me, and I'll come back to Virgo in a second, for me, it was Sagittarius. I was like, why do they lie all the time? Right? And until I realized it wasn't lying, and I'll get to this more when I get to Sagittarius, but it was exaggeration. And then I had to look at my relationship to exaggeration and enthusiasm. So that was my thing. So when people talk about Virgos and they say like, I hate Virgos, I'm like, well, what is that? Is that the critical faculties that they have that you want to somehow be above or beyond criticism? Or you haven't dealt with the internalized criticism of particular family members? And by virtue of that, because you haven't dealt with it, then you just rather like keep it up in a sealed in a locked closet of your mind, because then you feel safe rather than grown.
Oof.
So I think that's one particular thing. There can be ways in which Virgos, by being a sign of Mercury, can be cutting, and they can be, they can be vicious, right? I mean, that's one thing that we haven't talked about. There's this aspect of Virgo with that righteousness when it goes too far. We saw some of that.
I call it the fighting. There are two types of Virgos. There's a fighting Virgo that will go from 0 to I'll whoop your ass in 2 seconds. Like,
I'll cut you.
It is amazing to watch. But what I've learned is that they have taken so much that they didn't respond. By the time they have been done with it, they've already processed. You have already violated me to this point. I've allowed you to do that. And now it looks like I'm going from 0 to I'll whoop your ass, or I'm whipping your ass, to I've let you get away with this. And now enough. And then it's on and popping. It's favorite to watch it.
My favorite public takedown from a Virgo was Chris Christie taking down Marco Rubio before he exited the presidential election in 2016. Like, Chris Christie's a Virgo. And yeah, Virgos, you talked about where they sometimes can be compromised in ethics. Anthony Weiner, Virgo, and Chris Christie, Virgo, right? Both can have these wonky ethics, but Chris Christie, basically, Marco Rubio kept jabbing at him. He's like, all right, I can't exactly remember what was the final jab, but it was enough that took the balloon out of Marco Rubio's rise. Right? And he knew it. Chris Christie's a very smart man. Virgos often are very smart people. I have not met, to my knowledge, any Virgos where I'm just like, wow, you might be dumb, right? Now, I'm saying this, like, aren't you an astrologist? Aren't you supposed to be compassionate and open to people? I'm human, right? And so I have moments where I look at people, I'm like, oh, no, but I haven't had that moment with a Virgo. So Chris Christie knew what he was doing. I think he even said it, I'm going to take you out with me. So they can have some measure of that sensibility. Now, this is a tangent because we're going to talk later another time about Libra, but one of the things I'm going to talk about with Libra is something called the Zodiac Mafia. And there's 3 signs that I tell people not to mess with, or if they mess with them, they mess with them at their peril. There's Libra, there's Capricorn, and Pisces. But I still debate whether I should put Virgo in.
I think you should definitely.
I know Virgos tell me this every year when I talk about it. They're like, yo, you should put, But the only problem I have with putting Virgo in is that Virgos have this moment, because they are a mutable sign, where then they, devise the plan, the idea for revenge and getting back and blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of anguish and, think and rethink and think more on execution. And then they miss the window. That's the problem with Virgo, because it's like, then they kind of like, well, because they're processors, and the mutable signs are processors, which drive me crazy. I mean, this is personally, they'll say like, picking up a card, I picked up this card. Well, in this one particular book, it means this. And I looked in 2 other books and it meant something else. And then I've been thinking about, and you're like, damn, wow, there's a lot of data that you're managing with this. And maybe you just go with the one that just comes from your intuition. I don't want to deal with my intuition, right?
I want to be right.
I want to be right, which can be their fault. Whereas the other signs that I'm talking about, especially even Pisces, once they have an inner conviction, then that's all they need. We watched this movie last night. It was out in 2008. So, I mean, many of you probably have seen it. Doubt.
Yeah. Meryl Streep and
with Meryl Streep.
Viola Davis. Yes.
Yeah. And so, Meryl Streep, was like, she had this inner conviction, right? That's all she needed. Like, did you have any proof? Nope. That could be more Pisces. Virgo is kind of like, well, I'm putting the proof together, and I have this, taking photos, blah, 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 screenshots.
So what's the best, like, as you put your team together, or, you're building.
I like that.
What's the best configuration, or the best role for a Virgo on your
quality
team?
control? Quality control.
That was quick.
Yeah, they're excellent quality control at in analyzing data, the compilation of the data in terms of what it means and where to put it to use. You know, the thing that can happen with Gemini as another sign of Mercury is that they can have a lot of assortment of facts, and then you might ask them, especially as a Taurus, like, well, what do I do with that? I don't know. This is interesting. Whereas Virgo is more Vulcan, more Spock-like, and saying like, I think with that we could do this, 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 and this in this particular way. Um, they're looking more for the practical applications of things with that sense of research and understanding things. And the only problem is that they can get into the paralysis of analysis if they're dealing with too many factors, which then leads us to the next sign, because that's the answer to it.
Mhm.
The cardinal sign that kind of breaks through and is like, okay, we have the facts, but now how do we balance them out? How do we weigh them out?
And finally, because I absolutely I love having Virgos in my life. I just,
So
and
do
it,
I.
I didn't know as a young person that I collected Virgos until I looked up and I was like, oh, that person's a Virgo. That's why I love, because I need to be corrected. Like I left on my own devices, scorched earth, everybody's trampled, people just, it's just, I'm full steam ahead. A Virgo is going to tap me on the shoulders unafraid and say, you probably shouldn't do that. And I'm going to listen because it's been my experience when I listen, it turns out right.
They can
So,
see, yeah, they can see more of the factors involved. I mean, the data sets, whatever you want to describe it, um, because that's what they're also good at.
so as we move forward, and I love that you said like a lot of the times the things that we don't like in another sign, and that can go for human beings, of course, are the things that we ourselves are struggling with. I think this process of unlocking astrology for me is really self-examination, as we said before, self-exploration, and trying to get to an understanding of who we are, because you said all of the signs exist within us.
That's true.
So it's just going through like, where's the Virgo here? And, if I don't like that, why is that bothering me? And let me examine myself instead of that person. I love that. All right. So final thing, your favorite Virgo.
This may surprise her. Dream Hampton.
Really?
Mm.
I like Dream too. Dreams fire. Powerhouse.
And then, oh well, yeah, Dream Hampton living right in terms of you know a, even public Virgo, um, and then
And for people
Rich.
who don't know, Dream Hampton took out R. Kelly.
Mhm.
Just most recently, her,
And then the other public Virgo who is not with us anymore is Richard Wright. Complicated man, complicated legacy, but his analysis, especially at this formative period in our history, Black history, was profound, and he was also instrumental and inspiring to other authors that we've come to love, like Ralph Ellison, um, and James Baldwin. So I
mm,
think, and yeah, he wasn't perfect, and he wasn't always, you know, he did find some meticulous expression for his Virgo-ness toward the end of his life with his haikus. I thought, yeah, as a novelist, he struggled, but in terms of dealing with succinctness and kind of getting to that level of precision, he really got into that through haikus.
wow. Of course, my favorite is Michael Jackson. Uh, just because I think he was so misunderstood, and I also love Barry White, uh, who's another Virgo. On the acting side, Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black,
Mm-hmm.
who could play all of these different characters. And I don't know if you've watched the Orphan Black series, but
I haven't. I just think I saw
okay,
one episode.
okay, it is interesting. But she literally could transform herself into all of these multiple, and they were different people. And I think that's so Virgo on some level, which you didn't talk about the ability when you talked about mutability. There's that part, even though they're so righteous and direct, there's also this part where they can be
No,
so.
that's absolutely spot on. I mean, even you know, my friend, maybe she might be mad, like, you didn't list me as your favorite Virgo, Anika Noni Rose.
Wait, you're friends with her?
Mhm.
She's amazing. Okay,
She's amazing.
continue. She another mutable, another person who could play that when she was in power. Oh, was she
She was in
scary?
power. I mean, you know, she definitely is someone that Hollywood needs to recognize more.
I agree.
You know, when she played Kizzy, she gave us a whole
Oh
different
my
Kizzy.
God. Wait, she was in what was the Kerry Washington in the fire, something in the fire, something happened to the fire, the things left in the fire, the things. All right, you don't know what I'm talking about. Y'all do.
No.
Y'all hit it in the comments. Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon, an amazing short series.
Oh, how can we forget this Virgo? I mean, you're probably gonna be like, of course we can forget that Virgo, but this is very important. Tyler Perry. And I thought
Oh,
of
yes.
Tyler because I was thinking of Anika and her portrayal. I think the woman in yellow in, you know, for Color Girls. Because we can't forget that he did that. Now, I'm going to say something about Virgos with Tyler.
Wait. Let me just finish the fire thing.
Yeah.
She was in it maybe 1 or 2 episodes and murdered it. All right, so we can move on.
She murders everything that she touches.
That's true. Okay,
I mean,
so Tyler Perry.
Especially if anyone has seen Jingle Jangle, right? I mean, so that was also phenomenal. But Tyler Perry, you know, and I went through my bourgeoisie moment like everyone else has, you know, like, why does he make films like this? You know, blah, blah, blah. Realizing like, okay, I may not be his audience, whatever. However you feel about Tyler Perry, here's one thing we can't take away from this man, right? Is that he has built this empire. And he has, again, going with that service orientation, but to a better sensibility, you know, by buying these acres of land, having the studio. Now there are more people who are producing films in Atlanta on his grounds than almost anyone else.
Yes.
Right. That's a lesson, right? And people get into like their feels and like, well, I don't like that, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? What can you learn? This is the key thing of learning things through astrology. It's like, rather than being all up in your feels all the time about what you like and dislike, right? What can you learn? And that is a Virgo sensibility. So, I mean, he learned. He knew.
And I'm sorry, because I'm not an astrologist, but I have experience with these folk, and it's little fires everywhere. It just came to me. They also don't give a F what you think, which is a trait that I absolutely love. Tyler Perry didn't give a F that y'all thought him in the dress, the Chitlin Circuit thing. He could give a F. He had a vision and a plan, and you were not going to take him off his course because of your opinions. They don't care about your opinions. I love that about Virgos. Oh, they don't care. Okay.
And that vision, right, is what has led him to have an unfettered, unparalleled success.
Yeah.
And leverage. I mean, that's a key word. I mean, not just success in terms of like how white people define it, but the leverage to be able to do what he wants to do. And I'm just going to say it, you know, some people are going to be mad at me, but, you know, Spike can't do that. So
on that note, thank you, sir. What you're not going to do is get me involved in a Spike slander on this program. Anyway, Samuel Reynolds, thank you. And
like Spike, but I'm just like, I mean, this.
All right, well, all right. Hit us in the comments, hit the like button, share this with folk, follow Sam at Unlock Astrology on the Twitters. Next up, Libra. Y'all put your seatbelts on. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.